Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. Well, we've got some head-scratching weather coming here over the next couple of weeks. No above average temperatures anytime in sight here for much of the central and eastern United States. Hope a lot of you got to up north got to get up and watch the Northern Light show last night. I know I wasn't able to here in North Carolina, but yeah, another geomagnetic storm produced some very vivid colors. But in my life, the only northern lights I've ever seen were stuck in traffic in the north. So, but I'm ching. Anyway, let's talk about the weather for the next couple of days and really the next couple of weeks. And I guess the question I'm going to have to ask is, where was this all winter? What in the world? We've got a very active track across the southern and eastern United States, multiple storms, multiple cool and wet days coming over the next couple of weeks, probably more ruined weekends when it looks like in the northeast here with heavy rain in the forecast once again later this weekend. And just a very unsettled weather pattern. Out west, it is going to warm up. And down in Florida, we're going to see more rain, which will benefit the recent drought. We'll see warm weather, and severe weather chances are going to start to climb here in Texas again over the next couple of days. Here's a look from weatherbell.com at our weekly temperature outlook. So this is more of a longer range forecast. And you can see this period here over the next week is going to remain well below average. That's what these blue colors are, several degrees below average, right through the end of May. And as we get even further into May, we start to see some warming across the plains, but cool weather across the north. And typically when we see this, we see a return of very active severe weather and tornadoes. The reason why is that this will indicate a stronger jet stream across the central part of the country, warming across Texas and the plains, but cool weather up here means more contrast and more significant storms. So we are going to see a return to active tornado weather here towards the middle of the month of May, and that pattern will continue right on into the end of May. So a very active tornado season continues here, even though we've had a bit of a break here over the last few days. That will likely continue. But notice, really no persistent warmth anywhere in the east through the next 20 or 21 days or so. Just kind of a cooler than average weather pattern. So feeling like late March and early April here for many of you in the Northeast. Do not put away the jackets anytime soon, really right through the end of the month of May. Out west, it is going to be warmer here the next few days, but then we cool right back down. And this may end up being a little bit too cool in California, but nonetheless, a very kind of frustrating setup, as a lot of us in the East really didn't get a lot of winter and a lot of snow. And now the pattern would have been favorable if we had had this, say 3-4 months ago. Here's a look at the upper level pattern, and we kind of see more of the same here. Shots of cool coming into the east, not really making it all the way to Florida. Warmer than average temperatures aloft over western and northern Canada, and including the western United States. And then as we get into about the 8th, 9th, 10th of May, we see more contrast here across the central part of the country, meaning the plains into the Ohio Valley will likely see more active severe weather as we get to about May 10th to 15th. Meanwhile, the Northeast will remain cooler than average and unsettled more than likely, with this weather pattern continuing right on through the rest of May. We do start warming back up across the southern U.S., so eventually it's going to feel hot again, but we probably have to wait another month for that to happen. Now, I mentioned the wet weather in the east. We see a very wet week across the southeastern United States, multiple storms carrying right on into the weekend and then up the east coast. This is above average precipitation right on through next week. It remains wetter than average across the east and the southeastern United States. And then as we get towards the middle of May, we start to see the framework for some more active weather across the central part of the country, while the eastern U.S. returns to near average precipitation. And you'll see it'll be pretty wet here across the southern plains. This will likely indicate an area of unsettled weather, tornadoes, severe weather, severe wind, and certainly that pattern will be there. So let's step back and look at the shorter term. And what we see on the map here is a large trough over the eastern United States and a disturbance which brought severe weather to deep South Texas, now moving over the north central Gulf and approaching Florida later today. So we are going to see more active weather across the Florida Peninsula and maybe some severe weather, and that pattern continues into the day tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the west, it is unsettled as well across the Pacific Northwest. This trough will swing east. We'll see some snow over the Colorado Rockies, New Mexico Rockies, and then we'll see severe weather again over parts of Texas here tomorrow into the day on Wednesday, and then just wet weather across the eastern United States. We did have quite a storm on Saturday, several reports of severe weather, over 100 of those, actually over 150, including a couple of tornadoes, one in central Maryland, one over Sullivan County, New York, but primarily severe wind and some hail across the east. Meanwhile, later Saturday night, we saw a large hail over parts of Texas. And then yesterday, we had that storm complex dropping south across, I don't know what's going on with this website, but across deep South Texas. All right, I don't have time for that. We do have freeze watches and warnings this morning, a cold morning across much of the Midwest into the Tennessee Valley. As we head into the second part of the week, these will start to go away. We'll continue to see winter weather advisories and warnings, though, over the Rockies, and flood warnings and watches across the upper Mississippi Valley and the northern Red River Valley here as well. We do have a marginal risk of severe weather later today across central and south Florida. We are looking primarily at severe wind. The threat for tornadoes is very low. There is a threat for hail as well. Tomorrow, we also have a marginal risk a little bit farther south, staying south of I-4. And again, we are looking at the threat for some hail across eastern parts of Florida, and a low chance for any tornadoes, but a chance for some severe wind. And for day 3, that's Wednesday, we also have a marginal risk, and that begins to expand back towards the Tampa Bay region as well. Florida Keys not really in on this severe weather, but mainly South Florida and also interior parts of Central Florida will see that risk of severe weather. We have another storm moving out of the Rockies, and that'll bring us a slight risk for some severe weather tomorrow over central and northeastern Texas, even getting into the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex here later on Tuesday, staying north and west of the Houston area mostly, although Harris County is kind of clipped here by the slight risk. And we'll see a small chance for some tornadoes in this area as well, a few supercell storms, and a bigger risk for some severe wind and maybe some intense hail just to the east of Austin, all the way up to about Fort Worth and over to about College Station. So basically just east of the heart of Texas has that risk for severe weather. Day 3 on Wednesday, we continue to see a severe weather chance. It expands into the Arklatex region Wednesday evening, but much of northern and eastern Texas in a slight risk for severe weather on day 3, which is Wednesday. And you can see that chance is about 15%. Beyond Wednesday, the chance for severe weather is less predictable, so nothing showing up on the Storm Prediction Center at this point. As you see on the NAM here, we do have the risk for some supercells to form tomorrow afternoon over central Texas, and these kind of migrate westward, but really this isn't going to happen. This is just the index that indicates it. But as we get later into Wednesday, you'll see things starting to trend north and east into north central and eventually northeast Texas. And we'll get back to Texas in a little bit. But Florida, we do see storms expected to pop up this afternoon. Some of them could be pretty intense here over the middle parts of the peninsula. Those will drift towards the East Coast later today into this evening. So prepare for a lot of rain and likely some severe weather with localized supercell type storms with heavy rainfall, very heavy rain possibly, as well as some hail and some strong winds. Tomorrow should be pretty quiet for the first part of the day, and then more storms popping up in the afternoon, right on about 5 o'clock here across central parts of Florida and continuing into southeastern Florida towards the evening hours, and then a break, and then we'll see more storms popping up after 2 o'clock on Wednesday. In the southern plains, we will see active weather beginning later on tonight, just a few showers across Oklahoma, maybe a few rumbles of thunder, but really the main event starts tomorrow. We'll have rain over southern Kansas, eastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, and then storms blossoming over central and east central Texas here. This is going to be right around 7, 8 o'clock central time into northeastern Texas. And then we see these storms continuing east. More storms will pop up here with the heating of the day on Wednesday, which the herd does not go out that far, but I will show you the European and you guys can see that. So big trough in the eastern U.S., some snow showers over parts of the higher elevations of the Northeast, accumulating snow over parts of western and central Colorado with heavy rain in places like Denver and Colorado Springs here tomorrow afternoon and night. Then it changes over to snow. We'll see heavy rain along the Red River here on Wednesday, and then south of that, an area of stronger storms expected just south of the Red River, carrying into East Texas. So there could be some pretty big hail, but also a few supercell type storms with locally intense wind and also a tornado or two here. And then that continues to drop south and east. So it's going to be pretty nasty here across the southern U.S. here Wednesday into Thursday. This storm will move along the Gulf Coast. Probably no severe weather, at least nothing organized, but a lot of rain with it over the deep south here, right on into Thursday, and then carrying Thursday night into Friday into the eastern U.S. So northern Florida, right on up into the mid-Atlantic region. Going to be pretty wet here on Friday as low pressure moves up the North Carolina coast. If this was winter, we'd have a nice snow and ice storm over Virginia, but it's not, obviously. The next storm comes down right behind it, and you can see with the trough in the east, the storm track's going to carve right down across the southeastern U.S. here. Storm 1 going to bring wet weather Friday night into Saturday morning over the mid-Atlantic. Storm 2 is going to move eastward, and we see yet another wet day on Sunday. So we may get a little bit of a break on Saturday. Still going to be pretty cloudy in here, though, but very wet, unsettled across the Florida Peninsula. And then we see rain and storms over the southeast and very heavy rain expected over the mid-Atlantic and into parts of the northeast on Sunday. And here we go again with snow showers over the upper Midwest here across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northwestern Ontario Sunday night, with heavy rain expected across New England Sunday night into Monday of next week. So a very wet week over the central and eastern U.S., cold and unsettled across the Great Lakes. And the nice part about the West is that you don't really get to see much of this. It'll actually be pretty warm across the Southwest, but the Northwest could stay a little bit unsettled as well. Here's a look at snow totals expected to accumulate over Colorado, and amounts as much as 2 feet of new accumulation in places like Pikes Peak and in the higher elevations here. Denver's not going to see much. Most of this stays south of Denver. Colorado Springs may pick up an inch, mainly when you get to about Cheyenne Mountain, but definitely some good accumulation expected here over the higher terrain as well. And finally, our temperature forecast, and we see that chilly weather across the southern and eastern United States, continuing 50s during the day here on Wednesday in the Carolinas, well, at least the western Carolinas, northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, 50s in Oklahoma, low to mid 60s around Dallas, Fort Worth. But notice how warm it gets out to the southwest. We are heating up into the 80s across California, 90s even across the southern valley of California, 80s and 90s as well across the desert southwest. And that warmth continues to build here on Thursday. So the west gets nice and warm, 70s and 80s for many folks, whereas we're looking at temperatures staying in the 50s and 60s over the mid-Atlantic region. And over the weekend, we continue to see cool weather over the Northeast, 40s, 50s, and low 60s. So slightly below average temperatures continue. We will warm up on Saturday ahead of our next storm, but look how much colder it is in Oklahoma, 40s and 50s here west of Little Rock, Arkansas. It is warm in the southeast, but we see that cool air continuing to kind of get trapped here as we do have a cold wedge set up here across the mid-Atlantic region. And as that rain moves in on Sunday, it is not going to be a pretty day this upcoming weekend here. 50s and low 60s, but quite a bit of rain expected here on Sunday. Triple digit heat though in the southwest, so that's the place to go if you want to get away from this cool wet weather. Could you imagine what this would be like if it were winter time and we had the storm track after storm track coming up here into the colder air mass? We'd have a nice setup for a lot of snow and some big East Coast storms, but nonetheless, that's just not how things are looking here, unfortunately. Finally, let's look at total rainfall amounts. You can see the rain piles up here pretty significantly over the next week. Many places getting 2-3 inches of rain from Colorado on into Maryland, and also parts of Florida are going to see over 3 inches of rain. 1 to 2 across the Carolinas, a couple of inches over northern Texas, and even some needed rainfall here over the southern high plains. We could see over an inch of rain here. But the wet pattern continues, and next week we see quite a bit more rain over Texas and much of Florida as well. Pretty wet pattern here for most except for the Southwest. So I appreciate your time today. If you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, I very much would appreciate that. More day-to-day forecasts coming up here this week. Major weather, though, is going to take a bit of a break. That's okay, though. There's always something to watch in the weather world, and I really appreciate the fact that you took some time out of your day to come watch my video and to learn more about the weather. Also, I want to give all the glory to God, who has called me to do this every day, no matter what the weather, to share the weather with you guys, and also to just share why I believe what I believe. Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Going out in faith, belief in the unseen, that is what I do every day. Not knowing what the future holds, but believing that the Lord is there to provide for us no matter what, is what drives me to do what I do every day and to share that gospel with you. Gospel means good news, and this is the good news coming from the holy word of God. If you are a believer, you already understand this, but sometimes we just need to remind each other of that. If you're not a believer, again, I'm not going to fault you for that. We all are born into sin. Some of us choose to follow God, some do not. But it has made a huge difference for me knowing that in the end that I will have that prize of heaven and eternal life. And I really pray that that is going to be the case for you one way or another. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll have a video for you again in the morning. Have a blessed day. See you then.